A majority judgment has been handed down by the Chief Justice, concurrence of 7 judges, 2 judges dissenting. And it is to the effect that elections must be held by the 31st of July.
You can't set a date of an election without my concurrence. Period. I will not give legitimacy to that election date unless we agree. And I also urge the Honorable Gentleman, the President of this country, to observe the Constitution.
The head of state and government and commander-in-chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, President Robert Mugabe, has proclaimed Wednesday, the 31st of July, as the date for the holding of the harmonized elections.
Early this morning, I received a letter from President Mugabe dated 13 June 2013, in which he advised that in purported compliance with the Constitutional Court judgment, he was proclaiming the 31st July 2013 as the election day. I'll be leaving tomorrow for SADC, and I will fully brief the regional leaders on the crisis in Zimbabwe.
They were basically riding on SADC and hoping that SADC would push ZANU to delay the elections until at least the minimum sort of reforms had been instituted. But as we know, ZANU pulled the plug, and they were very clever about the way they went about it.
The president has complied with this court order. The president has no reason not to comply with the court order, and he's only coming before this court because he's complying with a resolution of SADC.
And they made it appear as if it's the courts that have decided on the election date, when in fact it wasn't the courts. It was a political decision.
Besides the say-so of the esteemed court, the legal basis for holding this election has not yet been established.
We'll have to live with it. We'll peruse the judgment when it is finally handed down. At this stage, we are not aware of what the reasons are.
It bears remembering that the same happened in the case of a challenge to the results of the 2002 presidential election. At that time, also a judgment was delivered and no reasons were given. To today, the results for that judgment in 2002 have still not been given.
People did not understand the extent of the groundwork that ZANU had done, the extent of the state of the voters' roll.
The MDC has noted with great concern the fraudulent activities around the voters' roll, which have been unearthed in different constituencies in the country. In Ward 42, on the 15th of April 2013, the voters' roll for that ward had a total of 5,196 names. 2 days later, the same voters' roll of the same ward had 17,068 names. This means that a total of 11,872 people were registered in a space of 2 days. I think it roughly translates into 153 voters per minute. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the pace at which voter registration has been going makes this impossible in one ward.
We had 2 days, but these 2 days we only discovered after the teams had already left that they were in our constituency.
You would see that Harare, with 25 constituents and a population of 2 million people, only has some 18 registration centers. In Mashonaland East, which is a ZANU-PF rural perceived stronghold, it has a population of 1.3 million, but a total of 100 registration centers.
All these stations have been actually structured by the politicians themselves. The Registrar General's people did not just come out with the stations, no.
We did not give the information as stakeholders. Perhaps he could shed more light on the stakeholders that gave that kind of information, because we have a problem with this kind of a skewed distribution of senders.
Some people was clever. They knew what they were doing right from the first day of the GNU. That is when they started basically playing around with the voters' roll and preparing for the rigging of the elections.
You all are aware of the voter registration. We are happy to report that there's been significant improvements in the current exercise. We at ZEC believe that we have registered the bulk of those requiring registration, taking into account the dwindling numbers that are appearing at the registration centers. and the shortening queues, especially in the rural areas.
We've been struggling for 2 days now, trying to register, and to no avail, we haven't registered as yet.
We are not much happy about it because of the time taken and the number of people that are being registered per day.
Nasi panapa, this is the last day. Asi chikumbira choti imi kana kuya kwa maita pano mazionera kuti vanhu vakawanda zvakadi.
And since 1980 inini ndaingovhota kusvika nanhasi tichingoregister up to now nhasi wacho hapana chiri kufamba.
Yeah, inini ndakambovhota but mazita hamuna hameno mazita wacho kuti anonga aromboiswa kuri.
Tatotasa makombiyuta tikunzira munotarisa hamuna totonzi batai kiu zvakare asi takavhota kanenge katatu kese saka tatomukiu zvakare.
We've written a new constitution which says every Zimbabwean got a right to vote, but we are denied the right to register as a vote. So how are we going to vote?
After the tamuka tawaya panapa tapo kuti makazi wasita almost 740 chauri kuita chimba atimo
handane 3 days ndiri pano handisati ndatombovhota nhamba yangu ramba ingonzi wapa number 26 wapa number 26
mazoese tikuboya saturday tange tiri panapa sunday tandiri pano monday tandiri pano last tuesday hatisati tabatsirwa tinobatsirei hazvipedzere zvangu kana vatsirira kuti vote ngavataure.
Well, ZIC, like all these other institutions that have been appointed by ZANU-PF, the major technical personnel have been also compromised. They were appointed by ZANU-PF, and these were ZANU-PF appointees, almost like what we've said with the judiciary. The same we can say about most of the government institutions. So as such, MDC had pretty little power.
We appointed the ZEC commissioners with the understanding that because these commissioners were appointed by all the 3 political parties, this commission will conduct the election in the most transparent way, which will reflect their integrity as a non-partisan organization. Look at the chaos that took place during the special voting.
What is this special vote all about? I have discounted the word special. I actually say I think it's a misnomer that it be called a special vote. It's simply an early vote. We have received 69,000 forms from the Zimbabwe Republic Police, yet the force stands at 50,000. How do we account for that? We at ZEC are relying on the figures that are given to us by the police.
I'm the Minister of Finance. The police establishment is 44,000. That is what we have been paying. And in terms of government law, government practices, there is no one who is recruited without treasury concurrence.
So the law is very, very clear that everybody who fills in that application must actually tell us the truth. And we are relying to a large extent on the integrity of the Zimbabwe Republic Police. We are also told that in addition to the regular police force, they also enlist reserve members, and these have a tendency of swelling their numbers.
I've looked at the law to see the legal definition of special constabulary. I haven't seen it. In some instances, and this is a very serious thing, and ZEC must take full responsibility, where the voters are called in before they go and cast their vote. That is the total and clear breach of the right to the secrecy of the vote. It's in total breach. And the secrecy of the vote is not just what happens inside the polling station. It's what happens before and what happens after the vote. The secrecy must be maintained. We have lost institutional trust in ZEC, despite our strong respect for individuals in it. But we feel that ZEC is no longer in charge, and a secret evil hand is now running this process.
ZANU-PF was focusing on power ministries. So basically they used those power ministries to telling effect, and that's what happened. And they never allowed MDC any influence at all in terms of the institutions, in terms of the processes that will really lead to the elections. And they are still young politicians. They're still very wet behind the ears. I think that's what this shows. ZANU-PF was meeting almost every week or every fortnight. The Politburo always met. And we were always wondering what are they discussing. So now we know what they were discussing. They've been on the ground for sustained periods of time. Whilst MDC basically assumed that the election would not happen. I think that was the problem, that they put all their eggs in one basket. But however, when push comes to shove, they were never going to be allowed to win these elections. I think that's the bottom line, that they were never going to win the elections.
We are faced with an election without reforms. What we have witnessed in the last few weeks is a concerted effort designed to rob the election of legitimacy before it has even begun.
MDC on its own, if we can afford them, they didn't maintain relationships, a close link with the civic organizations, especially the more than 40 civic organizations that created it. So there was a distance between the civic society groups and the MDC.
Don't expect us to pamper you with praises only. And I hope you will take what I'm going to say as a positive criticism. As you are aware, the formation of the MDC was a decision of the ZC2 Extraordinary Congress held at ZESA Training Center in Harare on 7 August 1999. Frankly, colleagues, we have been disturbed with some policy pronouncements that were coming from some of our colleagues here who are in government that are clearly anti-labor.
The civic organizations, in particular the trade unions, if you want, were the water that the fish of MDC should have survived. But the fish forgot that it needs the water to survive. I think that was the major problem, I think, for me, in terms of the MDC distancing itself from its own founding organizations. The MDC leadership was not at all coming back to its constituency. And yet its strength lay in the civic movement that had created it.
Teachers who were accredited to Anezek, this afternoon they've been told, you belong to PTUZ, you are not going to participate. It is something that is happening all over the country.
Okay.
At least the fact that you are here shows you are still interested in engaging with civil society. My question is is the goodwill on the part of the coalition government in terms of ensuring that civil society plays their role. Seeing that already the voter registration process is started and none of us have been accredited to participate in this process.
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission displayed a general sense of unwillingness to accept assistance in the process of voter education. Despite the substantive changes to our electoral system and the confusion that's abounded in the wake of the fast-tracked election date, there is a general failure to undertake a comprehensive, special and intensive voter registration exercise in compliance with the Constitution, leading to a situation where a large portion of eligible voters remained unregistered and therefore disenfranchised at the time the voters' roll was closed for the imminent election.
ZLHR has noted that in general, the lead up to the 2013 elections has been characterized by lower levels of overt violence than the period preceding the March 2008 election. ZLHR notes, however, continued incidences of intimidation and politically motivated violence, particularly in rural and remote constituencies, where traditional leaders and political party youths, respectively, have allowed themselves to be used by powerful politicians with means for their personal and party political agendas of power retention, leading to inter-party violence and rights violations.
It's a ZANU-PF tactic of trying to intimidate people and trying to harvest from the fear that they've instilled in people in the election of 2008.
We've got houses which were set on fire in Shamba South. The houses were set on fire, their food were also set on fire. They were left with nothing. They were just left with the clothes which they were wearing on that day. We have reported to Jomik. The Jomik people, they go to police, they try to engage the police, but the police are powerless. The situation is degenerating into the 2008 situation.
Ndakukwanisa kuona kutsva kweimba nedara rechibage hapana chimwe chinhu ndakaona. Vakati havasi kukwanisa kubva pamba pangu vachiramba vakandimirira, saka ndoona kuti vakaramba vakamirira kusvika usiku. Sekuti ndiri kusapota MDC.
People are afraid. People fear. We are living too close to our history. People know what happened in 2008. People know that even when ZANU-PF says there's no violence, they can just use it. It's a matter of timing. When they think it's appropriate to use it, they will use it.
What has been of concern in the pre-election period is the nuanced, strategic and malevolently intentional targeting of political activists and human rights defenders in an effort to undermine and disrupt their activities. Mobilizers, educators, human rights monitors, and those providing critical legal and psychosocial support services have been intentionally sought out for intimidation, harassment, and attack.
And the problem also with the donors, they were all focusing on elections. All the money was going towards elections. We also forgot about the grassroots, building the grassroots. We forgot the basics. That to win an election, to change things, even if you want reforms, there must be a demand from below. Now the unions are weak, the whole economy is informalized, which was deliberately done to undermine the power of the force of the ZCTU. Civil society organizations were basically now chasing donor funding. If it is the constitution, they all go to the constitution. If it's election, they all move to election. It's not at all anchored.
I'm not going to be here to observe the elections. I just came to touch base with our observers, but also to touch base particularly with the candidates, particularly presidential candidates. On the whole, we got the impression from all of them that the preparations up to now are satisfactory.
The truth of the matter is that I raised with her a number of issues of concern to the MDC. Specifically, I raised issues around the chaotic voter registration. I raised the issue of chaotic special vote, the way it was conducted, the lack of transparency around the voters' roll, printing of ballot papers. We raised the issue of polling stations and the deployment of polling stations. And I say these are concerns that have implications on the credibility and legitimacy of the election.
They are also happy generally with ZEC.
I did not meet her in a private room, the two of us, so it becomes her word against me. We know her background. Who doesn't know her background? It is a very unfortunate position to take, to accuse me of lying when I had a full meeting in which she was there, a number of her own delegation was there, a number of my staffers were there, and I pointed out these issues to her. Now the question is, why would she want to distort a meeting which everyone participated? It puts to question her integrity as an impartial observer to this process.
Having spoken to ZEC, from their explanations of their logistical arrangements for the 31st, if all goes according to the plan they've given us, we are satisfied.
With virtually a day to go to the election, no political party in Zimbabwe, other than ZANU-PF perhaps, has got a copy of the final voters' roll. We have people who are prepared to swear affidavits on oath to the effect that voter registration is still taking place in some areas. Political parties should have that voters' roll in electronic form, in searchable form, in analyzable form, so that we can audit and clean up the same. And ZEC again has not provided us with the final list of the polling stations. So what it effectively means is that they can actually create as many new polling stations as they want, and we will not have monitors and observers, agents and polling agents. If the process was being done credibly, why not simply comply with the law, Section 51A, and tell us how many ballot papers have been printed, by who, their serial numbers, and the deployment thereof. Another complaint is the media, the hate speech in the state media.
So that people will then vote for the MDC. But people now know the truth.
It's political strategy.
Tsvangirai's selfish political strategy cost the country 42 billion in sanctions, leading to job losses and poverty. Even former MDC members are realizing that that was a very bad political strategy and are coming out to publicly criticize Tsvangirai.
The malicious, vindictive statements that are being made in the media, particularly the state media. The fact, for instance, that we do not have access to the state media, yet President Mugabe's rallies are actually being aired live on our television.
And Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, President Robert Mugabe.
The Head of State and Government and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, President Robert Mugabe.
The Head of State and Government and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces, President Robert Mugabe.
We have come here today to enable you to conquer. You are our soldiers. You have a battle to fight. Go into that battle well armed. Go into that battle with the full knowledge that there is a political enemy. We have come here to correct the error, huge political error of 2008. Never again shall we allow those who work with our enemies, our erstwhile colonizers, the British imperialists and their allies. Never again shall we allow them to taste government, taste leadership of the nation. Pass an MDC. Starting.
There were some buses of Zupco that seemed they were carrying some people from other towns or rural areas, and some people were just forced to come to attend the rallies. I just need a t-shirt and a cap so that I would protect myself, because I'm afraid to be beaten, I'm afraid to be chased away by the ZANU-PF members. So I just go with my friends so that I would have access to this cape that I'm wearing and a t-shirt.
Everyone in the village, because they know the villagers are poor, everyone was now wearing the only clothes that you had to wear. They distributed mass distribution of these regalia, party regalia.
Today, Baba and myself brought a lot of gifts for all of you here.
The First Lady who donated an assortment of foodstuffs to the province comprising 10 tons of mealie meal, 10 tons of sugar beans, 2 tons of salt, and 560 cases of cooking oil said another consignment should be expected in the coming week.
I want to come to another issue, which is the arrest of Honorable Morgan Komichi. That ZEC can turn Morgan Komichi, who is in fact a witness to the shenanigans that took place with regards to the special vote. You turn a witness into an accused person. I think it's unfortunate, and I think it's a reflective of the mindset of our Zimbabwe Election Commission.
Polling starts at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, the 31st of July. You may then wonder, are we ready for the elections? And my brief answer to that is yes. You all know that the law obliges us as ZEC to give free copies, electronic copies of the voters' roll to candidates. Due to logistical issues and logistical problems, I am again informed that the Registrar General of Voters may not be currently in a position to issue out electronic copies.
Why, at this last minute, the electronic version is not available?
I think that the printed version of the voters' roll comes from
a software. Isn't that a simple informatics operation to go from a software to a USB key?
I'm sure the question of the electronic roll has been sufficiently answered by the chair. Thank you.
Not really.
We have prepared ballot paper to cover the 6.4 million. But over and above that, we have gone an additional 35% to cover for contingencies, to cover for discrepancies that will occur when we start distributing the ballot paper downstream. So with all those basic ingredients in place, yes, we will have a free and fair election on 31 July 2018.
We know that the system is working full out to cheat this election. Whereas in 2008, the dominant discourse of subverting the people's will was violence. In 2013, the dominant discourse of subverting the people's will has become the computer.
At 82% of urban polling stations, many potential voters were turned away and not permitted to vote for reasons which include names not appearing on the voters' roll and turning up at the wrong ward for voting.
An additional list of 65 polling stations was published on election day, both in contravention of Section 51 of the Electoral Act, which stipulates that polling stations should be publicized 3 weeks before polling, and well after contesting candidates had deployed their trained polling agents to their respective polling stations. In most cases, the only election agents deployed in these additional polling stations represented candidates from only one political party.
In the course of observing the elections, the mission noted that there was general adherence to the relevant national legal instrument and the SADC principles and guidelines governing democratic elections.
SADC was tired of Zimbabwe. They no longer wanted to have Zimbabwe, on their every summit, on the agenda of every summit.
These elections, and under the circumstances, have gone well. Elections in the world are not perfect. Political maturity counsels that in democracy, we not only vote, not only campaign, but accept the hard facts, particularly the outcome.
It would be good if we could count on our neighbors to uphold the principles that they themselves have pronounced. Quite clearly, those leaders who have congratulated Robert Mugabe for winning this election are at variance with the principles and guidelines for the conduct of democratic elections in the SADC region.
The outgoing SADC Senamao from Mozambique, outgoing executive secretary, he said Zimbabwe is such a good model for the rest of the region. What does it tell you about SADC? It becomes very difficult for SADC to even be effective anywhere else, because now Zimbabwe set a precedent.
They may find it expedient because they are tired of Zimbabwe, and we all know that our neighbors are tired of us. But they are setting the region on a very slippery path for the future.
And everyone can use Zimbabwe. You can say, oh, you didn't do this to Zimbabwe, but now you want to do it to me. So this is double standards, hypocrisy.
And I sense they have taken the easy route in preference to the correct route. There are also reports of busing of voters into various polling stations.
These are kids. Look at those.
Very young.
Kids. These are less than 18 kids.
There is strong suspicion that in the absence of a final voter's roll, the use of voter registration slips as proof of registration to vote could have been abused to enable multiple voting.
How can we cheat like this?
There are some buses which are here.
Because this is not on, that we can have this blatant cheating. They're from the raw areas, yes. Taken to thing, and then posing as officers. They've been bussed by those buses, as you can see. As one of them, a single address in Mount Pleasant, just one. You need a bus to come from Morris Depot. Morris Depot is just across the road. You need a bus to come from Morris Depot.
But their slips retain one place.
So why were they carried with buses?
Just take a sample of 5. Go to the voters' room with the slips. You find them not in the voters' room.
They're not in the voters' room.
But their slips are retain one place, and so we don't have the powers to.
When you are recruited, you have to shave your head into the police. Militias.
You can see from the car. That one, she's about 14 years or 12 years.
16 years, young people. And they're confused now.
I answered the question. Where do you get these people from? No, it's just a simple question. Because that's what we do. But Papi, where exactly?
But my friend, you carry people. This question is where did you carry them? It's a simple question. It's a simple question.
Yes.
So you need the authority to say that, or you've forgotten where you picked them up. It's unbelievable. And they were actually in the process of setting up a third polling station. You are seeing people who are looking like they are coming from a Hobbit movie. You've never seen anything like that. Without hair, they look like Golam would be in good company with these people.
In previous elections, where indelible ink was used, ultraviolet machines were also used to detect those who had already voted. Curiously, in this election, that practice was abandoned, and it was left to the inspection of elections officers to determine the pink finger. There are widespread reports of high numbers of voters seeking assistance, either on account of illiteracy or poor sight. Given the high level of literacy in Zimbabwe and the low level of assisted voters in 2008, it is disingenuous to suggest that Zimbabweans are less literate in 2013 than they were in 2008.
Inseni ndakaita polling agent ku ward 9 Chiwashira ward. Ndakaona kuvoterwa kwanhu kwangu kwakanyanyisa. Polling station maiti mukapinda vanhu 5. 4 ndo vaivoterwa, 1 ndiye aikwanisa kuvota ega. Saka ndakagaramo kwe 1 hour makapinda vanhu 50. Pa vanhu 50 ndakaona vanhu 34 vachivoterwa.
Vanhu vakanga vachishungurudzwa uri pa queue chapo pekuvota ka. Waitobaya kuti wewe ndikuenda kunovotera ndini. Anozvona. Vanhu vechidiki vachava vatoziva vakadzidza. Ainzi handigone kunyora. Ende zvinhu zvakaishamisa ende zvimwe zvacho zvinotonyadzisa.
We're all caught flat-footed. Look at the winners. Are they very excited about the victory? Don't see it. When we see what you see, basically, faces that you cannot look you in the face. They won the vote without the numbers, and they know it. Up to now, you can't convince me that all of a sudden, ZANU-PF is very popular in Manikala. ZANU-PF is very popular in Masvingo. ZANU-PF can win in South Matabele in South. I mean, no ways. The nation should be shaking with people demanding, fairness, demanding basically that the stolen vote be, rectified. But that is not coming from the people.
I don't think it is a given that to paper over the turmoil that we are all suffering and feeling as a result of this daylight robbery will necessarily guarantee stability.
We can rig an election, but you can't rig the economy. People are expecting today, now.
It is going to be very difficult. But it does not take away from the people of Zimbabwe the right and obligation to struggle for their independence and for their freedom. Independence we have, flag is waving, and the national anthem is being sung, but the freedom isn't there.